ever so much for joining us today for this unfortunate circumstances get together. Obviously, here in the UK, we've just been told, or 24 hours ago, we were told that we're in lockdown. I'm just keen to understand what the situation is for the demolition industry in the US at the moment. I don't know which one of you would like to take that, Jeff or Chris?
Yeah, I can hop in here. I think, as you may know, the United States is a federal system with each of our states maintaining safety and health of their respective citizens. Currently, right now, what we're watching unfold are different states coming out with proclamations, shelter in place, and/or different directives accordingly. So, depending on the state, Virginia just issued one, for instance, no groups of 10 or more. If you can telework, do so. The government itself, with the Department of Homeland Security, and then what's referred to as the Cyber Security Infrastructure and Security Agency, CISA, has released guidelines for essential services, and most of the states are following those guidelines. So what you're seeing right now, some states are listing construction as an essential service. Others have left it somewhat more vague. So we are still seeing job sites going.
Yeah, some states are actually have their own definition of essential employees, and some states are using what's called the CISA definition of essential workers. So that's the only thing I would add, Jeff, is that I am in a state where we are using a state definition of essential workers, mainly large construction projects, whether they be residential or commercial, are allowed to continue working at this point.
And I mean, you as a working contractor, Chris, how do you feel about that? Because we seem to be getting certainly mixed messages here. Obviously, everybody wants to keep working. We all have bills to pay and families to feed and that kind of thing. But there is obviously a global threat out there, and we do work in an industry where risk assessments and that kind of thing, that they are part and parcel of the job, and yet we seem to be, I wouldn't say overlooking, but we're almost like bypassing that risk, coming from the COVID-19 outbreak.
I think that our level of risk assessment and our daily project reviews, and with the work that we do, we are a lot farther ahead of some with our work practices and how we handle our work. So I think one of the biggest things now for a lot of contractors is making that decision whether they want to keep working or not, and then realizing that to keep working, things are going to change. We're going to have to take things a little bit slower. We're going to have to be a little more deliberate about every decision we make. We have to continue to push worker safety as the first and the first priority. The most utmost concern of ours should always be worker safety, and this is one more thing that drives that right to the front. So it's almost a contractor by contractor decision. Do they feel like they should keep working? Do they feel like they shouldn't keep working? And what kind of projects they're on also will add to that decision making. If you're in a highly sensitive infrastructure type project where completion is necessary to help fight this unfortunate situation we're in, then I think you have to make some decisions on if you're going to keep going or not. So it's a tough call to say, hey, I'm going to keep going and keep pushing, or I'm going to stop and kind of let this thing settle out. I think what we are finding is as contractors, our resiliency and our ability to adapt to situations is ever more evident. More and more people I talk to are figuring out how to work remotely, and even that person that you first thought you couldn't find a way to work for them to work remotely, we're figuring out how to do it. So I think with concerns to the demolition and remediation industry, I think we're pushing the envelope. I think we're really doing a good job of making sure that our workers are safe and figuring out ways to attack the flanks of this thing so we can keep going.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most sobering things I've heard or seen in the whole of this, a guy that you and I both shared some time with in Japan last year, Chris, is Stefano Panseri, who, being an Italian contractor, he finds himself right at the very heart of probably the epicenter, if you like. And one of the messages that he sent me, I mean, it's something that will stick with me. He said he went in the space of 72 hours from trying to figure out the likely economic impact of the COVID outbreak to making sure that his family actually survived. You know, that really is a stark reminder of just what a serious issue it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been communicating with Stefano as well, and same thing. It was that line. It may not have been verbatim, but he said that same thing to me. How in such a short period of time his priorities changed. So I'm hopeful we can learn from the past. There's the very short past, and find a time when we can get all of this behind us.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that came up, we were speaking just before we came on air with Jeff there, is the fact that it's an awful comparison to draw, but 9/11 is very, very fresh in the minds of the US demolition business. And I think you appear to, certainly from an outside point of view, you seem to be on a different level of preparedness, even to the point, Jeff, where you said you're now looking ahead to how demolition can play a role post-COVID.
Yeah, that's correct. We have a lot of specialty companies that work in hospitals that specialize in remediation efforts. I think I'd mentioned to you, there's one company I talked to the other day that is decontaminating buses right now. So, from our standpoint, some of these members is how can we help? So, we're trying to figure that out daily and putting up resources on our webpage to assist our members as they work through this.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned your website, because obviously I keep a watching brief on your website, as I do with a number of others. And I hand on heart, I've been very impressed by the sheer volume of resources that you're making available to your members. How are you doing that? Is that just literally sort of working around the clock to pull in information as quickly and as effectively as you can?
Well, communication is key. Chris and I have been talking on the phone 2-3 times a day. Information that we have, information that our board members are sending us, is helping guide some of the resources that we've been putting up there. Chris and I, like I said, have been in daily communication. So anything that we're hearing in terms of resources, we're making sure it gets put up on the website. And then communication is key. So, we're trying to limit our communication to essentials to our members right now. So we've been focused on pushing out the resources on this webpage, webinars, different resources for our members to use. We just put up a toolbox talk yesterday, and I know our safety committee is going to be meeting this week, and we'll be discussing and curating additional resources. So.
Now, when you say meeting, are they actually meeting, or is this being done? Is this being done over the telephone?
I was just going to add that this will most likely be a remote meeting over the telephone, Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, it has literally changed the landscape. I mean, as I say, I was telling Jeff I was in Vegas a couple of weeks ago for the ConExpo show, and I have now mastered the elbow bump rather than the handshake, which is the most bizarre thing I think I've ever encountered. But that's the world we live in now, isn't it?
I find that, yes, it is the world we live in, and it is odd because, we've spent time together, Mark, and you know how I am. I'm a handshake, hug, clap on the back kind of guy. And
I miss the hugs, I've got to be honest.
But it's really been, it's changing. And to jump on what Jeff just said, the amount of information that's coming out right now is mind-boggling. There's just every day there's a plenitude of emails and more information. And I think one of the other things that the NDA, our staff and Jeff are really doing a good job at is, like Jeff said, pushing out competent, pertinent, important information. Not every email, not every piece of information that that flies out there. The other part of all this is everything is changing so rapidly. Day to day, guidelines and restrictions are just changing, and kudos to our NDA team for realizing that and making sure that our membership is as well informed. Key being as well informed as possible to any new restrictions, guidelines, or regulations.
That must be quite a difficult task because, speaking as an Englishman, we have Boris Johnson who tells the world what to do, and that's what we do. You obviously have national regulation, you have state regulation, and so on. So you must be absolutely buried under an avalanche of information, Jeff.
Yeah, it's like I mentioned, the frequent calls with Chris. So this is very much a team effort. So as I'm getting information, I'm filtering that through Chris or different volunteers, board members, and then posting what is most pertinent. So it is a lot of information, especially on a state-by-state level. So we're trying to stay focused on what is the end goal, what will help our member the most. There's normally at the NDA, we will do blog posts and things on, here's a different resource or here's an interesting project, but that's all completely changed. So even though I'm still getting those alerts, we're still getting some of that information, we have to maintain focus on resources for this pandemic as it, so all that other communication is sort of, it's still pertinent, but for our member alerts and our member communication, we're just staying very focused on this.
And I mentioned the fact that you guys in the States have this different approach to preparedness. How are you working alongside, the first responders and that kind of thing? Is there any liaison with those guys as well?
So we are part of a coalition called the Construction Industry Safety Council. And we've been working with other trade associations and other trade groups as we go through this on safety regulations, trying to get the most up to date. So that's another reason why our website, we've been plugging in a lot of that information. So there's really a coming together of the industry writ large in sharing of information and getting that stuff out there. So we're just keeping our ear to the ground, and while it is a lot of information, we have to sift through it and then push out what's pertinent.
I guess trying to take a positive out of what is a very bad situation at the moment. I think when all this blows over, those people that have pulled together and have shown that compassion and camaraderie, those are the guys that hopefully will come out on top in the long run. And as I say, I'm not trying to butter you up, guys, but I think the NDA is doing a very, very good job of making sure their members are informed.
Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. And I mean, if anything, with the NDA, it's very much a family camaraderie. And one thing that Chris has pushed and continues to talk about is the fact that it doesn't matter if you're in the United States or in Britain or in Japan, that there are commonalities there across all lines. And as an industry, we should be getting together and coming together. And Chris, I think the trip to Japan really underlined that, in our way of thinking. And we continue to share resources. And if there's anything anybody that's listening out there needs, feel free to go to our website, email us, and I can see what we have.
It's interesting you should say that. I mean, I'll leave Chris to fill this in, but that was one of the things that came out of one of your closing remarks there, Chris, while we were in Japan, is the fact that, we might all speak a different language, but we all speak demolition. Who knew that within, 6 months we'd all be speaking the language of a global pandemic. But it does feel like, that camaraderie that you helped create over there is now actually coming to fruition,
Yeah, it's we are in this together, and there's no more lines, there's no more separation. We as a world are in this together, and it's up to us to figure a way through it. It's up to us to stay positive, to find our way, and to do our best and never let something like this happen again. Again, as we talked about before, and I hope I send that message loud and clear. Collaboration when it comes to worker safety and saving lives is the one thing that matters. And these are trying times. It's an unprecedented situation. But if you look at these things, it's these times that bring people together, and the NDA is here to help. Whether you're a contractor and you're a member or not, we're here to get through this together, and that couldn't be done without the team we have in place, from Jeff and his team, my executive board, and the board of directors that we have today, and our ability to reach out and just talk like this with someone across the pond and make sure our message is there, that we're here to help wherever and however we can.